So, the translations are out for My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 356, and let's just say that in this chapter, we finally get a better understanding of how Endeavor became the man that he is, and we'll talk more about that, but first, right after this. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Man Drew, and I'm here to do my review of My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 356, titled Know Your Enemy. And this is a very double-edged meaning because not only is it about Endeavor, but it's also about All For One himself, because we get to learn a little bit more about both of these characters in this chapter. But overall, when it comes to this chapter of My Hero Academia, we are focusing on Endeavor. Specifically, we get hints to his flashback and his backstory in this chapter, as well as potentially, once again, finishing off the fight between All For One. Gosh, it feels like for the past 3 or 4 chapters, we have literally had the chapter ending with someone landing a devastating hit on All For One, or criticizing All For One in one way or another, and this chapter is no exception. So, let's dive more into the proper review and talk about what was great about this chapter of My Hero Academia. And nothing starts a chapter off more than seeing Tsukuyomi literally destroying the rest of All For One's mask. Because in this chapter, we get to get a new move from Tokoyami with the help of Jiro, where he pretty much uses his Ragnarok on his right arm and smashing it into All For One's face, breaking the mask completely. So yeah, Tokoyami was able to participate in the fight and do what he was supposed to do, break the mask. Now, this does not mean that he is strong enough to actually take out All For One on his own, but it shows that he is at the very least strong enough to land a decisive hit on All For One and break a key component of winning the fight. Unfortunately, it actually doesn't finish off All For One, and we do get a better understanding for why this may be the case. Because when we see Tsukuyomi using his new move, which is called Black Abyss, Ephemeral Ragnarok, we get an inner dialogue of All For One trying to understand what is going on in this situation. Because we get an inner monologue of All For One coming to a realization that something is not right, that his senses are lagging after he, lost his sight. He acquired different ways of obtaining vision through infrared to vibration detection. And All For One deduces that Jiro is not good enough at using her quirk to hinder his perception. So he begins to think about that it's just that his quirks are rebelling and that this is something that hasn't happened before and that he's the one in charge, and that All For One is able to correct this issue by consuming these quirks into himself. Because as Hawks is trying to deliver a fatal blow to All For One once again uses his rivet stab, which is very popular, but also very effective by All For One, to attempt to stab into all of these heroes while reforming and recreating his mask. He almost kills all 3 of these heroes, but luckily enough, Endeavor is there to save the day, while also losing his right arm in the process, which is going to be a running theme and a running motif in this chapter when it comes to the right arm. But what is even more interesting about the fact that All For One is disputing that Jiro had anything to do with disrupting his actual quirks, I don't think that may be the case. I do think that Jiro may be in a way have caused the quirks to rebel, which could be due to the fact that she does have a quirk that is able to mess with the vibration. And even though it may not be effective enough on its own to do so, it could be very possible that her feelings or her emotions or her voice was able to reverberate through her quirk and actually touch the vestiges inside of All For One, because most likely than not, the quirks that are rebelling may be the quirks that All For One is trying to use, and they may be able to sense those vibrations. Because we know for a fact that the vestiges inside of the users, either with All For One or One For All, are able to sense the outside surroundings of individuals, as well as potentially sense the outside emotions of individuals. We've seen it with One For All, with All Might being able to sense the emotions of the vestiges inside, and we know for a fact that the vestiges can obtain information from outside sources through the user. So it's not completely impossible that emotions could have gone through the vibrations inside of All For One from Jiro, because vibrations can be used as a form of communication. Mainly, you could view the idea of what Jiro is doing is 2 tin cans along a string. And that the one side of the tin can is Jiro using her vibrations, the string carrying the vibrations inside of All For One through All For One himself, through his body, and that it comes out on the other end inside of All For One for the vestiges to hear through the other side of the can. So that's a way that you can view it in a more scientific way, but more likely than not, it's more of a symbolic way of viewing it, how the vestiges inside of All For One are beginning to rebel because All For One himself is beginning to grow weaker, not necessarily in strength, but in will, and that he is having an actual difficult time against individuals he does not deem as being more than just side characters, more than just scrubs, more than just flies. But overall, All For One is really giving them the works, and once again, he rips off Endeavor's arm. The rest of this chapter pretty much being a deep dive analysis of why Enedavor is who he is. And it all starts with a dead father. Weirdly enough, not his dead father, because as we're getting into this chapter, Enedavor is reflecting on his life and how he's being criticized by his younger self, about how his condition, how his atonement, how his mistakes, how his responsibilities have all made him weaker in a sense, and how he needs to remember his origins, where we get to see that most likely than not, he was inspired to be a hero by seeing a father failing. And it's not in the sense of, oh, this person is in danger or did something stupid or dangerous, I need to begin saving people. But what I think happened with this incident with this father trying to stop a villain and saving his daughter instilled in Enedavor his own weakness, his own inferiority, and how he is extremely weak in comparison to the world that he lives in. And that through that weakness, he strives to be stronger. He strives to be the best. That's why he was jealous of All Might, who was a true superhuman. That's why he chose the name Enedavor, which means like hard work. That's why he was able to flaunt his ugliness to the outside so that he could survive. The enemy that he was trying to fight this entire time is his own weakness, his own inability to truly be strong. And how with that idea in mind, he can't really change because he needs to constantly overcome that weakness, which in a way is himself. And with this idea in mind, he pretty much burns away his older self and pretty much declares that the only thing that he can do is continue to curse his own weakness because that is what allows him to survive. And while he's thinking this and doing this, flames appear over the stump of his arm that was destroyed by the rivet stab, and he slams that flaming fist into All For One, once again destroying the mask as he announces that this is what he's going to do. It is his duty to stop All For One once and for all. As he also brings up this idea that he doesn't really care about being congratulated or not, that he's just going to overcome his own weakness. And something interesting that I noticed with this final double page spread is I think that it kind of confirms what Enedavor did. And that he cauterized his wound on his right side so that he'll be able to continue to fight afterwards. Which means that most likely than not, Enedavor probably finally defeated All For One. In a way. Or at the very least, severely hindered All For One's ability to breathe. Especially with, fire being blasted in front of his face. But we've seen this song and dance over the past few chapters, so I cannot definitively say that All For One is defeated right now. But overall, this was a very enjoyable chapter for My Hero Academia. We got some understanding of what's going on inside of All For One and the vestiges are rebelling, but probably the most impactful part of this entire chapter is just getting to learn more about Enedavor and discovering that the reasoning why he is fighting this entire time is to overcome the idea that he is weak. And that everything that he has done up until this moment is to try and overcome his own weaknesses. Which is the idea that he can never compare to All Might, he can never compare to Deku, that he truly can never truly be a superhuman, and that he will always be weak, but that through that always being weak allows him to continue to push further and further. Which, the irony of all of this is that when it comes to being superhuman, Deku and All Might are superhuman, but they are also the ones that were the most human. Because they were born quirkless, that means that they are the most human and the most superhuman in a world filled with quote-unquote superhumans with superpowers. So the poetic irony is there for Enedavor, which is pretty much Endeavor's story. He is a poetic irony of obtaining strength to surpass someone who didn't have any at all, and overcoming his own weaknesses to eventually become strong. So overall, really just enjoyed how this chapter more applies to the themes of My Hero Academia for what it means to be a hero, and Enedavor pretty much embodies that in this chapter, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, that's all I really have to say about this chapter. Hopefully you enjoyed this chapter, hopefully you enjoyed this review, and if you did, leave a like down below, and leave a comment on what you thought of this chapter. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!